Hi everyone. Let's learn about the concept of disk scheduling in this lecture. So if I have to tell you about disk scheduling, to learn about disk scheduling, first of all, we need to understand the structure of a disk. And we also need to understand why we are talking about only disk scheduling when it is not the only secondary storage device available. So let's try to learn the basics of what is a magnetic disk and what is the requirement for disk scheduling, and then we will move on to the disk scheduling algorithms. So first of all, we need secondary memory to store less frequently used information. We have two types of memory: primary memory, and which is nothing but your RAM, and your secondary memory. And we need the secondary memory, which is implemented through secondary storage devices to store our less frequently used information. Now we need secondary memory because of two reasons. One is the main memory is a volatile memory. That means as soon as you switch off the computer, all the contents present in the main memory will be lost. And the second one is main memory is not large enough to store all the programs and data. So for this reason, we need secondary storage devices, and the space which we get from secondary storage devices is called as secondary memory. Now, when I say secondary memory, it doesn't mean it's only magnetic disk. Secondary memory can be anything. It can be your magnetic disk, that is your hard disk. It can be your magnetic tape. I hope you would know what is audio cassette. Audio cassette can also be considered as one form of analog magnetic tape recording format for audio recording and playback. So audio cassette can be considered as one form of can also be considered as one form of secondary storage device. Or your CD-ROM is also a secondary storage device, or your DVD is also a secondary storage device. Even your pen drives, the removable pen drives which you use, that can also be considered as one secondary storage device. But then why are we learning only about magnetic disks? Is because much of the in modern computer systems, most of the secondary storage comes through magnetic disks. Okay, more modern computer systems makes use of magnetic disks, that is your magnetic hard disk, as secondary memory or as the main secondary storage device. Okay, that's why we are concentrating mostly on the magnetic hard disks or the disks for all our learning about the secondary storage devices, because it is being used by most of the computer systems as the primary mode of secondary memory. Now that's why we need to learn about the structure of a magnetic disk. Okay, because it is the primary secondary storage medium used in modern computer systems. So let's learn about the structure of a magnetic disk. Just try to visualize the diagram which you are seeing on the screen. So this is the structure of your magnetic disk. So let's try to understand this disk structure. To understand the concept of disk scheduling, you have to understand the meaning of all the terms which you are seeing in the diagram now. Okay. Without understanding that, if I simply say time taken by the read-write head to move to the desired sector, if I simply say like that, you will not understand anything. Time taken by the read-write head to access the desired track. So if you don't know this diagram, or if you don't visualize this diagram, then you will not understand what I'm trying to say when I say time taken for the read-write head to move to the desired sector or track. So try to understand this diagram and always remember this whenever I talk about the disks in future. So let's try to understand this magnetic disk structure. Try to look at the diagram. So we need to understand this disk structure because the data is going to be stored in this magnetic disks, and the data has to be accessed by the computer system. Data is going to be stored in this magnetic disks because this is our primary secondary storage device, and the data stored on this disks has to be accessed by the computer system. So for this reason, we need to understand how the data is stored and how the data has to be retrieved by the computer system. So let's learn the structure of the magnetic disk. So the first thing is, see the diagram, the magnetic disk is composed of many different platters. Okay, what is platter? You can see that circular thing which resembles a CD, right? That circular portion, you have three such circular portions. That circular portion which resembles your CD is called as a platter of your magnetic disk. Okay, each magnetic disk may contain several platters. Although I say that it resembles a CD, it is not similar to a CD, because the difference between a CD and a platter on this magnetic disk is In a CD, only one portion of the CD will be, data will be written into only one portion of the CD. Okay. And all the read write operations will be done only on the one portion of the CD. But in platter, it is not like that. It is coated with magnetic material on both the above as well as the bottom portion of the platter. So data can be read or recorded both from the above of the platter as well as from the bottom of the platter. Okay, in both the sides, data is recorded and retrieved. Okay, that is the main difference. It is coated with magnetic material on both the sides. So data is read and written from both the sides of the platter. That is why you can see in the diagram, see the read-write head. You can see one read-write head on the top as well as one read-write head on the bottom of the platter. Why? Because data can be read or written from the top of the platter as well as from the bottom of the platter. That is one main difference between the platter on the magnetic disk and your CD. Though it resembles like a CD, it is not having the same concept as that of a CD. Okay, so now we understood what is the meaning of platter. Platter is nothing but the circular portion on your magnetic disk in which the data is recorded and read on both the sides of the platter. Okay, now each platter is divided into circular shaped tracks. Just look into the diagram where, so what is this? Just look into the diagram and see where I'm showing my mouse pointer. Each platter is divided into circular shaped tracks. Now this is your track. Okay. So this is your track. Each platter will make use of two read-write heads, as I told you. This is your one read-write head. This is another read-write head. So platter is divided into circular shaped portions called as tracks. Okay, it doesn't mean each platter contains only one track. Each platter may contain many tracks, more than one track. So platter is divided into circular portions called tracks. And tracks, you can see the lines inside the tracks, right? The circular portion. Inside this track, you can see small lines, right? These small divisions are called sectors. Okay. So the platter is divided into circular portions called tracks, and tracks are further divided into small portions called sectors. And so where are we going to store the data? We are going to store the data in these sectors. You can see here the arrow which is mentioning the sector. Each individual portion of each individual division of the track is called a sector. Okay. So platter is divided into circular portions called tracks, and tracks are further divided into different parts called as sectors, and data is going to be recorded and read from the sectors of the disk. Okay. So, and you can see from the diagram, this is your track. The length of the track near to the center is less than the length of the track farther away from the center, far from the center. It is obvious. The length of the track, this is one track. You can have another track next to it. You can have one more track next to it. Length of the track near to the center will be the length of the track near the center will always be less than the length of the track which is far away from the center. That is very logical. I hope you will be able to understand it. And then what is a cylinder? Tracks of the same distance from the center form a cylinder. Okay, you can see all these three tracks are of the same distance from the center. Okay, all these three tracks which are of the same distance from the center form a cylinder. Okay. And then whenever the data has to be stored, it has to be stored in the sectors and it has to be retrieved from the sectors. And so I hope this is all about the parts of a magnetic disk. And you have the read-write head. If I say read-write head or if I say arm, both means the same thing. You have two read-write heads for every platter. We have two read-write heads because data is written on both sides of the platter. And so to read or write the data from the platter, we need two read-write heads. And one more thing is, you have write-once optical disks. A type of disk. In write-once optical disk, it allows the data to be written only once. In such types of disks, you cannot write multiple times. Only if it is not a write-once optical disk, you can write to it multiple times. Okay, that is about the major parts of a magnetic disk, major structure of disk, that is also called as disk structure. Now, we have some terminologies here. I have also posted another diagram to show you a top view of the magnetic disk structure. Okay. So in the previous diagram, it showed like as if there's only one track, right? So in this diagram, you can see that there are many tracks. So this is one track, this is another track, and this is another track. So totally you have 3 tracks here. Okay. Now you have some terminologies here. Try to absorb and understand the terminologies. You have a terminology called data transfer rate. What is the meaning of data transfer rate? Time it takes, the amount of time it takes for transferring the data between the disk to the main memory. We need to transfer the data from the disk to main memory for doing the operations. So time it takes, amount of time it takes to transfer the data from the disk to the main memory is called as data transfer rate. Okay. Next terminology is the seek time. Okay. What is seek time? The time taken by the read-write head to move to the desired track. This is one track, this is one track, this is one track. I told you there will be one read-write head which will be holding this platter. And so the time taken, see this diagram, the time taken by the read-write head to move to the desired track. You can have many number of tracks in a platter. So the read-write head has to move to the desired track which contains the required data. So time taken by the read-write head to move to the desired track is called as seek time. Okay. Then you have another terminology called as rotational latency. What is the meaning of this rotational latency? It is you have reached the track. What next? You have to reach the sector inside the track, right? That is your rotational latency. Rotational latency is time taken by the arm or the read-write head to reach the desired sector on the track. Time taken by the arm or the read-write head to reach the desired sector on the track is called as rotational latency. Okay, so seek time is time taken by the read-write head to reach the desired track. After reaching the track, it has to reach the desired sector which is containing the data. So time taken by the read-write head to reach the desired sector to access the data is called as rotational latency. Okay, so that is all about the basic terminologies. I'll repeat once again because you will encounter these terms fully. So what is seek time? Time taken by the read-write head, time taken by the arm or the read-write head to move to the desired track which is containing the data. What is rotational latency? Time taken by the read-write head or the arm to move to the desired sector on the track. Okay. So I hope you are clear in the basics now. Now let's move on to the topic of disk scheduling. So now let's try to understand why we need disk scheduling. Our disk scheduling is similar to our CPU scheduling. Okay. So in consider a typical multi-programming system. The OS will be receiving multiple disk access requests from multiple processes at same point of time. At any point of time, the OS will be receiving multiple disk input output requests from many processes at the same point of time. Okay, because you are going to have multiple processes in memory, they're all going to do disk input output. So OS has to schedule these requests correctly, properly to achieve fast access time, and also it has to minimize the seek time. And another criteria is it has to also improve the bandwidth. The OS has to schedule the disk input output requests in such a way that it has to schedule it properly. Many disk input output requests are going to come. The OS has to schedule these input output requests correctly and properly so that the access time is fast, the seek time is less, and the disk bandwidth is improved. Another thing is the OS also has to manage the hardware efficiently. Hardware management, resource management is one of the main functions of operating system, and your disk is also a resource. So that is also another reason for the operating system to do this scheduling efficiently. Now coming back to our disk scheduling, operating system has to improve the access time. It has to be fast. That means time taken to access the data from the disk is called access time. It has to be fast. It has to minimize the seek time. What is the meaning of seek time? Just now I told you, time taken by the read-write head to move to the desired track is called as seek time. That has to be less. Why? If it is not less, access time is going to become more, and time taken to access the data is going to become more. So seek time has to be less so that we get a fast access time. Third criteria is we need to improve the disk bandwidth. Now this is a new terminology. I'll tell you what is the meaning of disk bandwidth. Disk bandwidth is nothing but the total number of bytes transferred. Data is transferred in the form of bytes from the disk. Okay. So total number of bytes transferred divided by the total time between the first request for service and the completion of the last transfer. So if I have to tell you in simple terms, it is nothing but the total number of bytes transferred with respect to time at which the request for service arrived and the time at which the last transfer happened. Okay. So this bandwidth is nothing but how much of bytes it is possible for the OS to transfer in a fixed span of time between the service request and the data transfer. Okay, so this disk bandwidth has to be improved. That is also one main criteria in your disk scheduling. It should be able to transfer more amount of bytes of data fast in fast access time. So with all this criteria in mind, the OS has to do disk scheduling. Okay. So let's come to our topic of disk scheduling algorithms. So why does the OS need a disk scheduling algorithm? Just like we saw different types of CPU scheduling algorithms, we have many scheduling algorithms to schedule the disk input output requests. So why does an OS need the disk scheduling algorithms? Is because the OS is going to receive multiple disk input output requests from multiple processes in the memory. Okay. When one request is completed, the OS has to decide or choose which pending request to service next. Okay, when it finishes the servicing of one disk input output request, it has to decide if there's going to be a queue of requests which are going to be maintained in a disk queue. We call it as disk queue. Just like we had the ready queue in CPU scheduling, here all the processes which have issued the disk input output request, all such requests will be stored in the disk queue. So for out of the disk queue, the OS has to decide which input output request, which disk input output request has to be serviced next. For that, it makes use of disk scheduling algorithms. Okay, so here the thing which you have to remember is all the disk input output requests by processes will be maintained in a something called as a disk queue. Okay, now I hope you are clear with the basics of what is the meaning of disk structure, what is disk structure, what is the meaning of seek time, what is rotational latency, and why do we need a disk scheduling algorithm, and what is disk scheduling. Now let's proceed to learn about the different types of disk scheduling algorithms. There are 5 different types of disk scheduling algorithms. We will learn about FCFS, SSTF, and scan scheduling in this lecture, and we will learn about CSCAN and loop scheduling in the next lecture. So these are the 5 types of disk scheduling algorithms. First come, first serve scheduling. SSTF stands for shortest seek time first scheduling. Third one is scan scheduling. Fourth one is circular scan scheduling. And fifth one is loop scheduling. We also have another variation called C-loop scheduling, which is a variation of the C-scan scheduling. Okay, so so this is a very important topic in operating systems, disk scheduling. You will be, whether you are writing GATE exam or if you are writing any competitive exam or if you are writing your university examination, you will definitely get questions on this topic. So first type of scheduling is first come first serve scheduling. So what is this first come first serve scheduling? As the name implies, it services the disk input output requests in the order in which they arrive into the disk input output queue. So before that, let's try to understand what is the meaning of this numbers written here. All the numbers written here are cylinder numbers. Okay, thus the cylinders are going to contain the data blocks which actually store your data. Okay, the cylinders contain the data blocks which actually store your data. This is all requests to data blocks stored in the cylinders, and this is all your cylinder numbers which contain the data. And all this disk input output requests to these different cylinder numbers will be maintained in your disk queue, as I told you. And you will be given a question like this where it says that head pointer is initially at 53. So it says that the head pointer, the initial position of the head pointer will also be given. Okay, so here it says that initial position of the head pointer is at 53. And we are learning about FCFS scheduling, which is first come first serve scheduling, which means that the disk input output requests will be processed in the order in which they arrive into the disk queue. Okay, so let's learn about it. So for solving this thing, so you have to write the disk queue request like this. Okay, this is the queue request which is given in the question: 98, 183, 37, 122, and so on. So that write it down here. The next is write the position of the head pointer. Head pointer is as given in the question. Head pointer starts at position 53. Now draw a line like this and write down all the disk input output requests. Write down all the cylinder numbers in ascending order. Okay, we assume that cylinder number starts from 0 and ends at 199 in all the problems. Okay, assume that the cylinder number starts at 0 and ends at 199. Otherwise, if it is otherwise, then it will be given in the question. Follow the order, follow the numbering which is given as per the question. Now here, these are all the disk input output requests. These are all the cylinder numbers which I have written here. Okay, we assume that it starts from 0 and ends at 199, and then these are all the requests. And see here, there is a request for 14, so I have written 14 here. Then there is a request for 37, so I have written 37. Then the head pointer is told to be starting at 53, so I have written 53. Then we have 65, 67, then 98, then 122, and so I have written all those cylinder numbers in this line here. Okay, draw a line like this and then write down all the cylinder requests in this line in ascending order like this. If the starting and the ending is not given, just we assume that it starts from 0 and ends with the, like after 183, the last portion of the last cylinder number might be 199, right? So we are writing till 199 here. So next thing which you have to do is doing our FCFS scheduling. So here FCFS means process the requests in which they order, process the requests in the order in which they arrive into the system. The head pointer starts at 53. Okay, and then the head pointer starts at 53 and the first request which arrives is 98. Okay, so it services that request. From 53 it moves to 98. Okay, what I'm trying to draw here, whatever it is written here is the head movement, read write head movement. Okay, we are trying to draw or project the movement of the read write head from which cylinder number to which cylinder number it moves. So you have to draw it like this. You have to draw the cylinder, you have to draw the read write head movement like this, and then you have to calculate the total head movement. So first request is 98 and the head pointer starts at 53. Okay, so from 53 the head moves to 98. Okay, and then it finishes the service. Next request is 183 in the order in the queue. So from 98 it goes to 183. Next request is 37. So from 183 the head moves to 37. Next request is 122. So from 37 it moves to 122. Next request in the queue is 14. So from 122 it moves to 14. And then the next request is 124. So from 14 it moves to 124. Then the next request is 65. So from 124 it moves to 65. And then the next request is 67. So from 60, next request is 67. So from 65 it moves to 67. Okay, this is how we draw the head movement. What we have drawn here is the read write head movement, which is serviced based on the order in which the requests arrive into the disk queue. Next, we have to calculate the total head movement. How to calculate the total head movement? See here, it starts from 53 and ends at 98. So here the movement is 98 minus 53. Next, it starts from 98 for the next request. It starts from 98. Just to subtract the ending point and the starting point. Okay, that is how you calculate the total head movement. 183 minus 98. So 183 minus 98 I have written here. Next one is 183 and then 37. So 183 minus 37. Next request is 122. Ending point is 122 and starts at 37. So 122 minus 37. Next starting point is 122 and ending point is 14. So 122 minus 14. So in this way, I have written the head movement for all the servicing of requests. Okay, after writing that, I have subtracted it. 98 minus 53 is 45. 183 minus 98 is 85. 183 minus 37 is 146, and so on. Then when you add up all these things, you are getting 640 cylinders. The unit which you have to write here is cylinders. Okay. So you are getting total head movement is it has to move through 640 cylinders. So this is about your first come first serve scheduling algorithm. So but the disadvantage here is, see this one. See here, the read-write head is at 122 and it goes on to service cylinder number 14, and then the read-write head drastically moves to 124. 124 was just near to 122. It could have serviced 124 before going to 14. So there is a wastage of head movement here. It has to move from 122 to 14 and then back drastically. It has to come again to 124. So this creates a lot of head movement. The total head movement could have been decreased if this was avoided. And if the total head movement becomes more, performance gets decreased. Total head movement has to be less in order to increase the performance. Okay. So that's why we go in for the next type of scheduling called as shortest seek time first scheduling. So shortest seek time first scheduling is called in short as SSTF scheduling. So just now I told you in the previous example, we had this 122, we had cylinder request of 122 and then 14 and then 124. So it has to move from 122 to 14, then come back again to 124, which was nearby to 122. So if whichever cylinder request is having shortest access time, if we serviced that request, then it would have reduced the total head movement. And that concept is being utilized in this shortest seek time first scheduling. Okay, this has a good improvement over your first come first serve scheduling, but then it is not, we cannot say that it is a perfect optimal algorithm. So let's see how we can implement shortest seek time first scheduling. So as usual, we have a disk queue which shows your disk input output, which shows your disk access request. And then your head pointer starts at the position 53. And then we draw a diagram indicating starting from 0 and then ending at 199. And then we write down all the disk input output requests in the input output queue in ascending order. This is shortest seek time first scheduling. Okay. So the head starts at 53. And then it checks to see which is having it checks to see what are all the disk input output requests near it and which is shortest. It is having two requests, one is 65 and the other one is 37. Okay, so 65 minus 53 is 12 and 53 minus 37 is 16. So the shortest seek time is for 65. So from 53 it services 65. Similarly, from 65, it can go to 67 or it can go to 37. Obviously, 67 is nearby. It is having the shortest seek time. So from 65, the head moves to service 67. Similarly, from 67, it has two requests. One is 98 and the other one is 37. So here, distance between 67 to 37 is 30 and distance between 98 to 67 is 31. So 37 is nearby. So from this position, from 65 it services from 67 it moves to 37, and then from 37 similarly it can go to 98 or it can go to 14. 98 has the largest access time and 14 has the smallest access time. So from 37 it goes to 14. And then beyond 14 there is no other request. So it turns back, it reverses the head position, turns in this direction and services all the requests one by one. So from 14 it moves to the next request is 98. All other requests are having only greater seek times. So the next request is 98. So it services the request for cylinder 98. And then it services request for cylinder 122. It is all in increasing order only. So if you see the seek time also, whichever is comes next will be the one which is having the shortest seek time. So from 98 it services 122, 124, 1 and then 183. Okay. So this is your shortest seek time first scheduling. The disk arm starts at one position, checks to see what requests are near it and finds out which is having the shortest seek time. So if I have to tell you in common terms, find out the difference between the two, 65 minus 53 and 53 minus 37. Whichever is less, the disk arm will move in that direction. Okay, so after doing this, we calculate the total head movement. See here, from 53 it has moved to 65. So 65 minus 53. And then from 65 it has moved to 67. So 67 minus 65. From 67 it has moved to 37. So we have to calculate 67 minus 37. And then from 37 it has moved to 14. So we have to calculate 37 minus 14. From 14 it has moved to 98. So we have to calculate 98 minus 14. So that is how I have written it here. This elaborate detailed explanation of like this detailed writing of total head movement is not there in the textbook. So for your understanding, it's being written here how we get into this number. Okay, we do this and then we add up all those things. We will get 236 cylinders. So that is all about shortest seek time first scheduling. We will learn about the next type of scheduling, that is scan scheduling, C-scan scheduling, and loop scheduling in the next lecture.